Greetings gamers, I'm Anto and I've been running an online D&D campaign now for almost 3 years, and today I'm going to talk about how you can run D&D online. This is a video that was requested by a member of my Discord server that I've been meaning to make for a while now, but given the current state of affairs, I thought it particularly relevant to make it this week so that you can all make plans to go and carry on playing your D&D games, just move them online. If you've been wanting to play D&D online for a while, or you're suddenly having to make adjustments based on everything that's going on at the minute, this video will hopefully help you get set up. Running a game online presents a different set of challenges to running a game in person, both in a technical sense of running the game, but also from a dungeon master perspective and how you need to approach different things as a dungeon master. Today I'm going to tell you pretty much everything you need to know to get up and running playing D&D or any other RPG online. We'll start with some practical advice for setting up the game, including what kind of game to run, what platform to use, where to look for players, how to vet your players, and then we'll move on to some advice on how being a dungeon master is different online than it is in person. There's going to be a lot of information in this video, and I'll be talking about a lot of different products and services. Everything that I talk about, I will leave a link to down in the description below for you to be able to go and look more in depth at it or pick it up. And this video isn't going to be a straight tutorial on how to use some of the things I'm going to be talking about. If you'd like to see tutorials on those things, please leave a comment down below and I will look into making them for you. So let's dive in and start talking about how you can run your game of D&D online. The first thing that you need to consider is what kind of game are you going to run, and I don't mean what system are you going to play, I mean what kind of game. Is it going to be a digital play by post where it's text only? Is it going to be a game where you connect to each other and talk to each other using voice communication? Or is it going to be something where you have a camera, a webcam pointed at you and you can see each other's faces? The choice you make here will have a massive impact on how you run the rest of the game, so it's probably the first thing that you want to decide. For example, a text-only game is going to be much more slower paced. You'll have a lot more time to react to things, both as a player and a DM, and you don't necessarily need a set schedule. You can play over the course of an entire week. But in a game where you're all connected via a video chat, it's going to feel much more like you are actually at the table because you can see each other and see everyone's reactions to things. If you are thinking about running a game online and you are looking for players that are outside of your usual play group, the best place to probably start is with a voice-only game. You're probably going to get more people interested in a voice-only game because a lot of people aren't interested in text-only games and are quite shy and hesitant to have a camera pointed at them, but they're fine putting their headset on where no one can see them and talking with voice chat. Once you know what kind of game you are running, you need to decide on a platform. Discord is a really popular choice for text-based role-playing, and it's also a great option for voice and for video calls as well. It allows you to make a server for your game, create different text and voice channels within that server for different things, and it allows you to assign roles to the members of the server. If you play 5e, there's also a new Discord bot called Avray that syncs with D&D Beyond that looks really promising to be able to run a game using Discord. It's still in the early stages, it doesn't support paid content, but it includes all the SRD content and it will allow you to connect players' information from D&D Beyond into Discord. If you do plan on using video, you can use Discord, but you might want to switch to another platform, something like Google Hangouts or Zoom, where the video quality can be a little more stable and a little better. The next decision is whether to use a VTT, a virtual tabletop, or not. If you are running D&D online and you can't afford to go out and spend a lot of money on different software and all of the other bits, then you can just run Theatre of the Mind using Discord. You can get plenty of different Discord bots that will automate dice rolls, you can set target numbers, your players can input their information. But if you want something where you can move tokens around a map and you have some more automated features, you're probably going to want a virtual tabletop. If you're planning on using a VTT, you've got a couple of different options. The two most popular options are Roll20, which is free for its basic version and is widely available, and Fantasy Grounds, which is a paid option, but it is a little more powerful and can do a few more things. There are a ton of other options, including things like Tabletop Simulator and a bunch of other dedicated virtual tabletop programs, but they vary in their user base and the features that they offer. So if you're looking for a game and you want to appeal to as many people as possible, you probably want to stick with either Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds, or if you have a big Steam friends list, maybe the Tabletop Simulator. Roll20 is browser-based and has a game search function, which can be a good way to find a game or find new players, even though you don't know who you're going to get ahead of time. And Fantasy Grounds is run via a desktop application and not a browser-based system. This means you're not relying on external servers to handle all your data. You host Fantasy Grounds as the Dungeon Master on your local machine, and all your players connect to you directly. Both of these platforms, Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds, have official support from Wizards of the Coast, Paizo, and many other game publishers, so the most popular games and the support materials for them are probably available on one or both of those platforms. If you're playing D&D 5e, I would also highly recommend you check out D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond isn't a virtual tabletop, but it does have a lot of really useful features that I think most Dungeon Masters and most players would really benefit from. They have a character builder that does a lot of the legwork for you as a player. There's an encounter builder, so as a Dungeon Master, you can drag your party's information in and put them against monsters, and it will simulate how hard or challenging those combats should be on paper, which is really, really useful, especially for newer low-level DMs. It can help you avoid potential TPKs with your party when you don't want them, and you also can have access to the entire library of 5e material. All the source books are available to purchase on D&D Beyond in a digital searchable format, and it's that searchable nature that makes D&D Beyond so powerful. I have been using it now for a couple of months and I am in love with it. It's so useful to be able to just go type in the search bar, look up a rule and get the rule there in front of you. It tells you what book it's in, where you can find it, but it just makes things much easier. There are 5th edition SRDs available online, but I'm not a huge fan of pretty much any of them, either for their design and layout or because they only cover the basic SRD material, because that is all they're legally allowed to publish, whereas D&D Beyond has a license with Wizards, so you can buy the content and then you have it there to search through. Even if I were running a game with Fantasy Grounds or Roll20 or Tabletop Simulator, I would still have my D&D Beyond open because I have access to all of the materials, and I find it quicker to search up a rule or a spell or try and get clarification on something using D&D Beyond versus using the inbuilt tools in something like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds. And then there's also the matter of world building and sharing information with your players. You can easily use Discord or whatever messaging service you like to push information or images to your players about the world so that they can learn a little bit more about it. But there are a lot of different services that offer a wiki style option that your players can browse at their leisure and see different things about your world. The most well-known and probably popular service like this is World Anvil, but there are other options available such as Legend Keeper, which I have done a review for, which you can see up here. And there's also Microsoft OneNote. Microsoft OneNote is what I personally use to keep track of all my world building information. I've got an entire playlist that I'll link down in the description below on how to use OneNote for D&D and other RPGs. It is an incredibly powerful tool for Dungeon Masters, and I also have an entire Dungeon Masters Bible available that gets you set up with a load of different notebooks with pre-made templates for things like cities, NPCs, characters, a whole load of things to get you up and running, so I will link that down in the description as well. For my personal game, I use Fantasy Grounds to push the images out to my players, and I will also sometimes share information with them via Discord. I use Onenote, like I said, for the bulk of my world building, and for making maps I use Wonderdraft for my region maps and Dungeon Draft for my dungeon maps. I've got reviews on both of those programs. Again, links to them will be down in the description below. So once you know what kind of game you're playing, it's time to start looking for your players. If you have friends that you think might be interested, now's the time to get in touch with them. You can use the fact that they can play at home as a real selling point for coming and joining your game. It's easier to connect to a game online from the comfort of your own home rather than having to travel to meet up with your friends. Even if you live in the same city, a lot of the time, if you've all got busy lives, you get home from work, you don't want to be going out then and traveling to someone's house all the time. So that can be a selling point to get more people interested in your game. You can play from home. All you need is your PC or laptop or what have you. If you don't know anyone personally that is interested in playing, there are a lot of different ways you can find players online. Your first stop should be the Looking for Game subreddit, which I will link down in the description below. This place is dedicated to people trying to find groups for their tabletop RPGs, and it is a large and quite active community, so that is where I would go first to look for a new group of players. In general, you will probably find it easier to find players than to find a dungeon master. Usually when people are looking for dungeon masters and they say, oh, me and a couple of friends are interested in playing, we need someone to DM, they get few if no responses sometimes. Whereas if you as a DM post and say, I'm going to run this game, I'm looking for 5 players, chances are within a day you'll have more than 5 people wanting to join your game. So if you're looking to play D&D Online and you're struggling to find a group, consider stepping into that Dungeon Master role. It's a huge amount of fun in its own right, but it also means that you can get your games up and running easier. If you use Roll20 to play your games, that site has its own game search feature. This is a really easy and quick way to look for players. But as I've said, you don't know anything about the people that are requesting to join your game. So you're going to have to do a little bit of legwork to make sure they're going to be the right fit for you. And then of course you can post in places like Facebook groups, other subreddits, or there's Discord servers dedicated to finding games. My Discord server, the Icarus Games Discord, has a section, a channel dedicated to looking for a game. So if you're not a member of that already, link will be down in the description. When you're looking for players for your game, you want to give enough information up front so that you don't get people who aren't interested in what you're running contacting you, because that can really slow the whole process down. You want to be as detailed as possible without being boring. So some things that potential players might want to know about your game are: what system are you playing and what materials can they draw from? When are you playing your game? What level is the game starting at? How frequent are your sessions? And what makes your game interesting? A lot of people trip up on this last point, I feel, and end up putting far too much information available up front, and people see this huge wall of text and just turn off immediately. Instead, use short, evocative language to get potential players excited about the world that you're going to be running and want to contact you. So an example that I might post for a campaign that I was running in the Desert Nation of Ashk could look like this. Players wanted for a weekly 5th edition D&D campaign set in the Desert Nation of Ashk. Ashk takes inspiration from 1001 Arabian Nights and adventure films such as Indiana Jones, The Mummy and National Treasure. In Ashk, the city is safe and the wilderness is hostile. Morality is just varying shades of grey, and you'll be motivated by your personal desires rather than your desire to save the world. We'll be starting at 3rd level using materials from the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide and Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and we'll be playing every Wednesday night at 9 PM GMT for approximately 3 hours. If you're interested, message me more for information. By referencing existing material, I can help establish a tone for potential players. Without speaking to me, without playing the game, they should get a sense of the sort of game that this is going to be. They would know that the campaign would be a pulpy adventure, a dungeon and tomb delving setting where no character would be absolutely good or absolutely evil. Everyone would be much more grey and not like your typical fantasy land. Even if you think your setting is Truly unique and unlike anything that has ever come before. I highly encourage you to reference existing media when you're trying to pitch it to people. It gives them a baseline to draw upon to know what they're getting into. Seven Samurai meets Nightmare on Elm Street. This conjures up images of a pseudo-Japanese setting that's filled with extra-planar nightmare monsters. Whereas Monty Python meets Ocean's 11 makes you think of a heist campaign that's going to be far less serious and much more comedic. If nothing else, doing this weeds out players who aren't interested in playing the type of game that you want to run, which really speeds things up and brings us to how to vet your potential players. Once you've posted your ad and the applications start pouring in, it's time to choose who's going to be joining you on your adventures. This might be the most important step in the entire process. One problem player can tank a game, especially online where maybe everyone doesn't know each other and they don't have a long history of being friends together and they don't meet up face to face every week. One bad seed can really spoil the bunch. So how do we make sure that the players that join our game are the right fit? I think that process starts very early on in your ad. You need to be explicit about your system, your play frequency, and the kind of game that you want. That will weed out people who are looking for a different system, who can't commit to that level of play, and who want something completely different. If you want to run Seven Samurai meets Nightmare on Elm Street and someone doesn't want to play in something that sounds like that, then they won't join your campaign. They won't apply to play in your game, and you should only get people that like the sound of that and think, oh, that sounds like an interesting take, that sounds like something that could be really cool. Next, I think that when someone responds to your ad and says, hey, I'm interested, I'd like to know more, you should send them your campaign primer. Now, this is something, a document that goes into a little more detail about your world. You don't want to send them 100 pages of world history. They don't need to know what happened on the other side of the world half a century ago to a specific baron. You want to give them something that tells them very specific information about the game they're going to be playing in. So you want short prehistory, what your world looks like to the different races, what races are available in your setting, what the gods might look like, and then you want to give them a very brief overview of like a map, just to give them a sense of the setting. This is stuff that you would typically cover in a session 0, but I think it's important to send that out ahead of time so that the potential players can look at it, and if they read through it and decide, oh, this actually isn't what I thought it was going to be, I'm not that interested. You've not wasted a huge amount of time onboarding them into the game only for them to drop out 2 sessions in. Similarly, I think you should encourage them to make their character. Maybe not make the entire sheet, but certainly you want them to come up with a concept and pitch their race and class and backgrounds to you. You want to get an idea of what kind of character this person is going to play. If they turn around to you and say, I'm going to be a lizard folk rogue who hates everyone and is always on their own, and I want to spend my entire game stealing things, well, if that doesn't fit with the kind of game that you're running and you think that that is almost certainly going to lead to some inter-party conflict, well, you can say, look, that's not a great fit for this campaign. Why don't we work together and try and come up with something else? If they're a good player, they will probably say, yeah, sure, okay, let's work on something else together. If they dig their heels in, that's an early indicator that you might have problems with this player, and you might save yourself a lot of time by saying, look, I don't think that this campaign is for you. Once you have your short list of players, I really recommend setting up something like a Discord server and inviting them all into it, and then give it a week or 2 for them to talk in the server and discuss things, introduce themselves, and get a little bit of that natural rapport going before you pull them all together in a call. If possible, have an individual call with each of them just to give them their own sort of mini session 0 where you can talk over character ideas, talk to them, get a sense of them as a person, and then have a proper session 0 where everyone comes together and talks about their characters. You give them more information about the campaign, and then the next session you can go and start playing. So you've gathered the group, you've chosen your format, the virtual tabletop you're going to use, what system you're going to run, you've got your players. How do you actually DM an online game? The number one difference for the majority of games is going to be that your players can't see your face and can't read your body language. Unless you are running a webcam, all they're going to have is your voice or your text descriptions to go off. And this is the biggest difference. In person, the players get an immediate reaction from you when they do things, and when you're delivering exposition or talking in character, you can use your body language to convey things that you just can't convey through your voice alone. You can put emotions into your delivery that otherwise you'd have to explicitly say they look like this. Even if you are all using webcams, this is still kind of difficult because there are individual little windows with a person in, and it's much more difficult to focus on that than it is to focus on the group in front of you at the table. So people are much more likely to miss something or be looking at somewhere else on their screen or down at their phone or around at the room and miss some of those key body language moments. This might mean that you need to describe things that you wouldn't otherwise describe. So you might need to explicitly describe those small facial cues or little body language tics. You might have to describe the kind of smile the NPC gives instead of just smiling in character. When I run my online game, I still act out everything that I describe to my players. I narrate it to them, but I also act it out myself, even though they can't see me. If I'm describing a character taking a shot with an arrow, I will describe the way they draw the arrow from their quiver, the way they pull back on their bow and track their target and loose it through the air until it hits. Getting into the habit of still making the actions while you're describing them in an online game, I think is really beneficial. It allows you to know what an action looks like. If I say a character is afraid and I go into myself, I can picture that character doing it much more, and it makes it easier for me to describe what they're doing. Oh, they've bunched their shoulders up, their head has gone down, they've pulled their arms in close. It's easier to make those kinds of descriptions on the fly when you're doing the action yourself versus just narrating it. It also helps to keep your in-person at the table skills sharp, because when I go and play at the table, I will still do all those things. I would still act out the act of firing the bow and help immerse the players at the table. One of the biggest benefits of playing online versus in person is that it's really easy to share pictures with your players. You can use images of NPCs or locations to communicate details that you just couldn't get through using your voice or body language alone, or that would take too long to describe. I know that my players really like seeing pictures of their NPCs, even if I've given quite a detailed description of them. If I don't provide a picture, one of them will almost certainly go and find something that matches what's in their head, and they'll post it in the Discord and be like, that's what he looks like now. They like seeing those images because it helps them connect to the NPC more than it would at the table. You can also start saving up a bank of different landscape shots and environmental images so that when your players arrive at a location, you can push an image out to them to help them get a picture of what you're describing. Let's say you tell them they arrive at a desert tomb. Well, you can push a picture out of a desert tomb and say this is what you see, and immediately their brain will fill in the surrounding detail, and it helps them get immersed that much quicker. Another issue that seems to come up online a lot more than it does at the table is the issue of crosstalk. When you can't see your fellow players, it's much easier to talk across each other and to not pay full attention to what the other players at the table are saying. One way I get around this, at least in the early stages, is I ask each player individually what their reaction to any given situation is. So I might say that an NPC has just delivered a line of dialogue, and I will go from player to player and ask what their reaction or response to that is. This feels quite wooden at first, but it helps get the players into that mindset of we take turns, we don't talk over each other. As you spend more time together, your players will start to fall into more of a natural rhythm where they don't interrupt each other quite as frequently, but it's something that you can tackle early and tackle head on by just saying, right, don't speak until it's your turn to speak, and go around each of them individually. Another issue that's definitely worse when playing online than it is at playing at the table is getting the full attention of the players. At the table, the players can see you. You can see them. Anything they do, if they pick up their phone and start typing on their phone, you see it. They know that you can see it. But if you're playing online, even if you do have a webcam, you can't see everything that's going on. And it gives players that sense that they don't need to pay exact attention. What's the harm if they pick up their phone and just start texting away while you're delivering the bad guy's monologue? You know, you can still see their face. They might put the phone just out of sight and sit and click on it. In fact, there's nothing to stop a player, let's call him John, from opening up another window and just playing a game, a video game, while you're playing your online game, or getting up entirely, going to the bathroom, going to the kitchen, making a drink, brushing their teeth without saying that they're leaving, and then you're sat there speaking, saying, okay, John, it's your turn. John, it's your turn. John, where are you? And then John comes back, puts his headset on and says, oh, I'm back. There are a few ways around this as a DM of an online game, but by and large, you need to accept that a degree of this is always going to happen. It's much harder to keep your attention in an online game than it is in person, and for the most part, that is okay. But there are a few things you want to do to curb the worst of it. If a player is routinely not paying attention, you need to be quite stern. You need to remind them that it takes a lot of work and a lot of time and planning to set up a game of D&D or any other RPG, and you do this for them so that they can have fun and that you can all have fun together, and that it's really disrespectful for them to just ignore you or get up and leave without saying anything or not pay attention to you while you're speaking. Calling a player out will usually sort the problem immediately. If it becomes a frequent thing, then it's probably time to sit the player down aside out of the group and say, look, you need to pay more attention. It doesn't feel like you're engaged. Is there a reason you aren't engaged? Are you not enjoying the game? And work through the problem together. Playing online also probably means the players are playing from home and are much more comfortable during play. If you're playing in the evenings after people have gotten home from work or had a busy day, players can get sleepy. In my current campaign, we don't start until about 9 PM at night, and we usually play through until about 11:30, midnight sort of time. And over the years, a couple of players have actually fallen asleep during the game. I don't begrudge them this. We've all got busy lives, and the fact that they're turning up week in, week out is enough for me. If they fall asleep because they have been working all day and they've done a 12-hour shift and they're absolutely exhausted, well, I appreciate that they've chosen to come and play regardless. If they've fallen asleep, just fill them in on what's happening. If it's a problem that comes up every week, then you probably need to look at either changing your schedule, or that player needs to consider whether or not this is a game for them. It's important not to take something like this personally though, because it's very rarely a reflection on you as the DM. You're not putting them to sleep because you are boring, but a lot of people, if they're sitting in bed or sitting in a comfortable chair listening to other people talk at the end of a long day, it's reasonable for them to get sleepy. And if it's been a while since it's been their turn in combat, or since their character has had anything to say, it's not unreasonable to expect them to get a little bit sleepy. Another thing I do to help maintain my players' attention is in combat, when it comes to a player's turn, I will give them a brief recap of the last couple of activations. So if it comes to the barbarian's turn and 3 enemies have just been before them, I will very quickly say what each of those 3 enemies has done and where their friends are in relation to them. So when it comes to the barbarian's activation, I will say, right, the rogue is down, the hobgoblin is stood over him, these two hobgoblins are fighting with the cleric and you've got one hobgoblin 10 feet away. What do you do? And that just refreshes in their mind the things that have happened in the previous few rounds, as well as where everybody is. Even if they have a map with tokens, it is good to just recap that for them. It helps pull them back into the game. One of the real benefits of playing together online is that you have a forum of sorts to post things in between game sessions. Whether this is your Discord server or a Facebook group or something else, you can post updates to your players between the game sessions. The players can talk about the previous session between game sessions. Something I've done a few times in my game is after a particularly cinematic moment or a important event in game, I will go away and I will write a short piece of narrative prose and send that to my players in between games. I usually do this from the point of view of an NPC or one of the enemies, someone else that isn't a party member, just so that the players get a different view of the events than what they experienced. I also like to prompt my players between sessions, so if they have decided that they're going to break into the secluded cult in the next couple of sessions, I might ask them between games, what are the options that you're considering? What information do you know so far? Who do you know that you could go to for help? And what are you thinking you're going to do on the night? This helps them to brainstorm and come up with ideas. It also keeps the game fresh in their mind and keeps them engaged with it between sessions, but it also gives me ideas. So the players might say, oh well, we were thinking we might dig underneath the cult, there's an underground river that flows through there, we might use that to get underneath them and climb up. And that will prompt me to think, well, I haven't thought what's down there. I need to come up with something that's down there now so that they don't just arrive to nothingness. It's a really useful way for me to keep a finger on the pulse of the game and think about options that I can put in front of the players. So that's all for today, folks. I hope that you enjoyed this video and found it useful. And I hope that it has inspired you to try D&D and other RPGs online. If you have any tips for running online games that I've not covered here, post them down in the comments below for people to learn from your experiences. And also let me know what problems you might have had playing online games in the past. If you've never played D&D or any other RPG online, I highly encourage you try it out. It's a really great way to get more game time in, especially if meeting up with people at the moment isn't an option for you. If you enjoyed this video, please do leave a like down below to tell the overlord algorithm that it's worth showing to people. But until next time, happy gaming. Thanks for watching. If you're new here and you like what you see, hit that subscribe button. I release a new RPG, tabletop and world building related content every single week. And if you enjoy what I do here and want to help the channel grow, consider supporting me on Patreon. And if you want to keep watching, I've got another couple videos over there. But until next time, happy gaming.